Hello, my friends. It's Jules Caldwell coming back to you for another live session. Excited to be here today. We're launching the series She's Got Plans. And I just want to welcome my guest who's going to join me for the next 4 sessions, Matthew Henley, who's an investment advisor with RBC Dominion Securities. Matthew, welcome.
Thanks, Julie. Great to be here with you, talking through a really important subject, and hi to everyone who's joined in. It's great to see so many people connecting on this topic.
Yeah, we're super excited to launch this 4-week series. Matthew and I met, and I won't go into a lot of detail because we talked about this in our teaser last week, but we met about 1.5 years ago, found some synergies in the work that we're doing, and in our conversations, and because of Matthew's expertise in investments and finance, we said, you know what, we should really do a series on how we can help women kind of overcome the fears of, managing money and what that looks like. And so today we're kicking off the first of this 4-part series where we're going to dig into some of the conversations that as women, we may tend to avoid, or I'm going to say maybe even are embarrassed to have as it relates to money. And I say that because that's very much how I came into my conversations with Matthew, is I was embarrassed and even a little bit ashamed, and I'll talk about that a little bit later on. To set the stage a little bit for right now, this is really an open, safe space. We're just having a conversation, and we're trying to take away some of that fear and bias and stigma that comes with dealing with money. And I go, ooh, it sounds big, and it's really not complicated. It can be simple and straightforward, and there's really basic things that we can do to help put ourselves in this great position to move forward. And so Matthew and I are going to unpack some of that a little bit along the way, right, Matthew?
Yeah, that's it. It's I like how we've split this into 4 separate webinars. There's a lot of information to get through. Some of it will be a little bit complicated, but today we're really starting with the basics, starting to build that foundation. So again, thanks for joining, because this is a great first step to really understanding your financial situation and starting off your financial journey properly.
Yeah. So earlier I talked about the fact that I was a bit embarrassed and ashamed about where I was at financially. And I want to give a bit of context for that, because maybe this would resonate to some of the ladies who are watching here. When I was married, I very intentionally turned over responsibility for our finances over to my husband. When I was single, I attempted to take care of them. But then, when I got married, I thought, well, this is a guy thing to do. I'm going to let him take care of it. And unfortunately, for a number of reasons over our nearly 20-year marriage, we consolidated our debts once or twice. We had 2 occasions where we actually had to declare bankruptcy. And, in unpacking that, and after I divorced my husband, it just left me with so much shame and embarrassment about my journey with money. And I found myself even more confused and embarrassed about where things stood financially. And I recognized that I had learned and picked up some bad habits and patterns of poor financial decisions that have kept me and my kids from living the life that, I desire to live. And so I make this point for those of you who are following here with us today, because I think if you're anything like me, sometimes we get this mindset in our mind. My mindset was, I only need enough money to pay my bills so I can get by. I didn't want to, be rich and have all sorts of money and have huge savings accounts or make investments. And I was also very, and because I still am, risk averse when it comes to money. But in today's session, we're focusing on, where do I even start in understanding our financial picture? And so this is important. So whether you're married, whether you're single, whether you're divorced, whether you're a widower, I think understanding the importance of your role in being actively engaged in the financial conversation about what happens in your life is really, really important. Right, Matthew?
Yeah, that's it. I meet so many, I'll even say couples. It's not always women, but oftentimes, of course, it is, that have been left maybe a little bit in the dark or entirely in the dark, even in well-functioning partnerships and marriages, that can be the case, but especially in an instance of separation or divorce, one partner can often feel like they've been left out of the picture entirely, not know where they stand currently, and really, how do you plan for the future if you don't know where you're starting off? So that's what we'll really dive into today.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, so I do want us to dive in. I want us to make the most of the time that we have together, because it will fly by. But for those of you who are joining us live, feel free to comment in the chat on the platform you're using. And I believe we'll see some messages in there. So if you've got a question or an observation or a comment, please share. And if you're watching this on the replay after, please do the same as well. Feel free to reach out and we will get back to you. And, if you've got a great question, we'll make sure one of us can get the answer for you and send that back. If you've also registered to participate in this series, and for whatever reason you can't attend every session or you want to re-watch it, when you're registered, you'll get a follow-up after each day that we have our session where you can re-watch what we've talked about. And I'm a gal who's really big on taking action. And so there will always be an element in each of these 4 sessions where between Matthew and I, we have some sort of, I'm not going to say homework, I'm going to say of applied learning, so that we take away something around what we learned in that day. And so there might be additional resources or things that we'll refer you to, and we'll follow up in the emails. So if you're just catching us and you haven't registered, please register at any time, and we'll keep you posted on that. Okay, Matthew, so you are an expert in this area. What would you recommend to the women who are following right now as some of the foundational, what I call must-haves that women should be aware of with their finances? Where can they begin if they don't really know where things stand financially, and if they're like me and we're winging it, say, from month to month?
Well, Julie, it's a great question and great point for a lot of people to take on, because I think everyone listening should know that you're not alone. So many people, most people are probably in the same situation that you are right now, and maybe don't have a complete idea. Some maybe know to some degree their current financial situation, but you're not alone. And the best thing you can do is to get started. I think I tell, anytime I start working with a new client, before we even start talking about investing and investment returns and what we're trying to accomplish that way, we start with a financial plan. Building that plan, that understanding of where you're starting from, what your goals are, what you want to achieve. That's what drives the investment strategy, not the other way around. It's as we'll get into in the next couple of weeks, in the next few seminars, the investment returns are one thing, and sure, it's important, but making sure they match your financial plan is so critical. So how do we do that? How do we start to build out your financial plan and really understand where you're starting at? I think the basics. I think if I asked everyone listening in what your salary is, everyone for the most part knows, maybe to the dollar, what their annual salary is. Maybe even after taxes, they know exactly how much money comes in, but not as many people know how much money goes out. They don't have a complete picture or outlook on expenses, and that's probably where I would start. Looking at your income versus expenses, and you don't necessarily have to cut anything out today, but start looking for red flags for a long-term situation. How can you prioritize or reprioritize some of those expenses to build some sustainable long-term financial health and eventually wealth? I would start to look at what your existing assets are versus liabilities. Do you own a home, even if there's a mortgage on it? Do you have other lifestyle assets that in the future can be either liquidated to fund retirement or some lifestyle goals, or do you have more things that over time are just going to cost more and more money? There's no right or wrong answer, but get everything on paper, start to understand exactly where you stand, and then you can start to build your financial plan around that. I think a lot of people starting off, it's great to have it's great to have goals, and goals are important, and financial goals are important. But really, start to the first step is really understanding where you're at today, and to me, money in versus money out is the first step.
Yeah, I love that. So there's a couple things in here, Matthew, that I wanted to touch on, and sort of this meat of what you're sharing with us. You keep saying, building your financial plan. I love the word plan. I'm one of those people who has a plan for everything. But what do you mean by building a financial plan? You told us some of the things to look at, but what should we be intimidated by building a financial plan, or is it something pretty simple and straightforward?
That's a really great question, and I think I would encourage everyone to start tracking income and expenses, even through an Excel document, Google Sheets. You don't need any fancy software. When we say plan, there are many variations that plan can take on, or forms that can take on. But just having a simple idea of money in versus money out is should be the top priority. We'll get to it later, but I'm happy to walk everyone through and work with everyone on a financial plan, and using some of the resources I have available. But just get started with Excel. It doesn't have to be overly complicated. You're just trying to get something documented that works for you, that you can look back on and understand, whether it's written on a piece of paper, or saved on your computer.
Yeah, no, I think that's great advice. And, that's what I did as well when, after I was divorced, and I was, in a place where I had to take responsibility for all my decisions. I started with an Excel document. There's lots of templates and stuff that are out there for how to build a budget, but understanding how much money was coming in and how much money was going out was actually so key in helping me understand where I needed to prioritize, maybe where I needed to cut back in some areas. If I knew that there were big events coming up in my life, when I needed to start saving. And when you start looking at that big picture from, the beginning of the year to the end of the year, it gives you some really juicy data. I never thought there was a time in my life where I'd get excited about, financial data.
That's right.
But it's very powerful, and it can be very freeing to have a sense of what's coming in, what's coming out, what you're saving, and those types of things as well, right?
And Julia, to add that, this is not static. This is a living document. It's going to continue to evolve. So get started. I don't let perfect be enemy of the good. It doesn't have to be a perfectly designed graphic or chart or anything like that. Just get started putting something on paper, and add to it, build to it as new information comes in. When I'm meeting with my clients, every time we meet, the first thing we pull up is the financial plan. Have an understanding if they are on track, if there's been any major changes, and how their updated financial situation reacts to the plan we have in place.
Yeah. And you know what, folks, I only recently started working with Matthew on my financial plan, because I thought, if we're going to do this series, let's do it, and I'll be real and raw, and I'll go through my own journey with him. And I was so afraid to do it, because I was like hiding like this, thinking, oh my gosh, he's going to see where I'm at and the mistakes I've made. But you know what? The reality is, we live in life, we learn from life. But Matthew didn't overwhelm me with a plethora of questions and complicated documents. And in fact, actually, I don't think you shared any documents with me. You talked to me through really basic, plain language type of help me understand what I need to know. And you filled in the blanks in the templates. And then at the end showed me a story through the information that you had captured from our conversations. And it was actually relatively painless.
Well, I'm glad to hear that. But you're exactly right. It has to be in plain language, because it doesn't do any good if you don't understand the information. If you're turned off or intimidated to look back at it, that's a disservice to what we're trying to accomplish, which is just a better understanding of what your current financial situation is at all times.
Yeah. One of the big things that I intentionally chose to do at the start of this fiscal year, or the calendar year, January, as a result of a conversation with you, was to start exploring my net worth. And up until I started to do this, net worth for me was a terrifying concept because, as I said, I'd had bankruptcies in the past, and they were quite a long time ago. I do own my home. Well, the bank owns most of it, but I do have equity in my home. But I've got debt on my credit cards because you rob Peter to pay Paul and all that kind of stuff. But it was the most powerful relieving exercise I could do was to build a bit of a net worth statement and understand that it's like, oh my goodness, I'm actually not in as bad a position as my mind told me that I was.
Well, it's funny, the planning process brings out different things for different people, and people value information differently. For you, Julie, it was net worth. It was having a better understanding of a number that was probably, I'm not oversharing, but probably better than what you may have thought. You had some concerns over that. I think it brought you some peace of mind. For others, it's getting those expenses tracked and down on paper.
Yeah.
For others, it's knowing that they can take the vacation, they can buy the new vehicle, whatever it might be. But when you start to see the information down on paper, people are looking for different things, and you can usually find some positives from this process.
Yeah.
I think that in terms of achieving goals through planning, people take different things, get different things out of this process. But so long as we use the financial planning process to maybe maximize the work your money can be doing for you, and being as efficient as possible, that's largely what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, and it's not about pointing out things you've done wrong. It's really about understanding where you're at so that you can have a vision for going forward. And I don't know about you, my friends, but I've got plans, I've got hopes, I've got dreams for where I want to go. I'm 2 years away from early retirement, and I'm out of there in 2 years. But this process over the last, I'm going to say for me, the last couple of years, because I've been much more intentional about it, has really helped me focus my priorities so that I can plan for that retirement. And Matthew's now helping me, really zone in on, okay, so let's make this a reality, and what can we do to help you get there?
Yeah,
Matthew, I wonder.
Sorry, I have to jump in because your situation was so perfect, because you have that goal of you have an age of mind of when you want to retire, and you have goals afterwards. And I find I meet so many people that are coming up to that potential age of retirement. Maybe they're 55 or 60, know they want to retire one day, but don't really know what that looks like. Don't really know, do they have that ability to retire? And this is how we start to learn that. What is a realistic timeline? How do we better understand the situation today so that there's a retirement plan in place that doesn't cause unnecessary stress, or you suddenly hit a date and leave without a plan. We're trying to avoid that, and the earlier the conversation, the better.
Matthew, I want to ask this question, and I feel like we've answered it in some way, but I want to ask it point blank. What does financial independence really mean for us? What should we try to strive for?
Well, that's a great question. I think that's another. Different people will interpret that in different ways. Julie, I think you're very in your situation. You're very purposeful about what you're looking to achieve down the road. You have big goals to carry on after your career, in a second career later on. I think it becomes easy when you have those goals and dreams ahead of you. I think it's maybe a little bit more difficult for the person who's planning to one day retire soon. They don't really know what they'll do after work. Can they afford to travel? Is it
their kids to college or university?
Exactly. Is it it a destination in the winter, or is it a month in Europe, and how does that impact the effects on net worth? So but that's why it's really about having the conversations. The conversation you and I had when we built your plan lasted probably over an hour of just getting to know some of your background, some of your priorities, and then saying, like, listen, do you think that family member will require some long-term care? Is that a cost you have to think about? You enjoy traveling. Do you want to stay in a nice hotel, or do you want to stay in an Airbnb? Or so getting to know each individual is a big part of the planning process, and that's what helps us determine how to achieve that financial independence for each person individually.
I think that's so helpful. Thank you for explaining that, Matthew. And, my friends, that's one of the reasons why I love doing the work that I do in my business. I specialize in working with women who recognize that they're in this place of transition where they've checked all the boxes of what society thinks they should be and do and have, but inside are feeling a little disconnected, or like they're still not quite there. And so as I work with women and help them pull out what that vision and those hopes and those dreams are, we get clear on what we value and what we want our life to look like, and the lifestyle we want to live, and the impact we want to have, and the legacy that we want to live. And more often than not, in those conversations, money comes into play, because our ability to do those different things is often dependent, not always, but often dependent on having access to resources. And so when I shared earlier that, when I was younger, my mindset was, oh, I just need enough to pay my bills and get by and I'll be happy. And to be honest, my mom's life advice, and Mom, if you're out there, I love you. I remember arguing about this with you when I was younger. She was marry a rich old man with a heart condition, and if that doesn't work out, become a doctor or a lawyer. I was like, I don't want any of that kind of stuff. I don't need that big job and the big bills. And as I've matured over the years and learned a lot along the way, I recognize now that I can't have the impact or leave the legacy or create the space for the women that I work with, or my kids or my family, to do what they want to do if I don't have access to money and resources to be able to support what that could look like. And so I've really had to work on my money mindset, if I can put it that way, to help me shift how I look at money and how I talk about money. Does this come up a lot for you, Matthew, when you're working with people?
Yeah. And you said something great there, because it's important not to confuse financial independence with extreme wealth, because those are two very different things. When you talk about a need for financial resources, so you can carry out some of your goals or priorities, or legacy, that's not necessarily in the form of handing cash to people that you know and love. It's giving you that financial freedom to take on your priorities in life, and that's what planning can offer, is giving a better idea of what you need coming in, so you can divert attention in other ways.
That's so true. Very, very powerful. So we've talked about some of the things that we could do. Are there any obvious tools or resources that come to mind that we should maybe consider or look at? And we talked about obviously just starting at the basics with Excel, and there's lots of templates out there, but is there anything else that comes to mind that we should maybe use or look for?
So you can Google all sorts of fancy financial calculators or budgeting templates. Again, I would start to use Excel. Maybe I'll introduce a framework that works for me and that I certainly use, that I would encourage others to consider, and that is FORM. FORM. And when you're thinking about your future, think about your family, your occupation, recreation, and money. So starting with family, what are your priorities for your family? Is it because everyone's different? Some people want to pay for their children's education. Others want them to work. Some want to leave a large inheritance to their children. Others don't. Every situation's different. So start to think about yours. What are your plans, priorities, and potential red flags in your family life, in your family situation? Do you have a parent that might be ill and require long-term care, or expensive costs around that? So getting to know, getting your family affairs in order and a good understanding of them is great. Occupation, what is your timeline for work? Are you new to the workforce? Are you getting close to retirement? Is there opportunity for promotion or savings? Do you have a pension? There's so many questions you can really ask in each of these categories, but but understanding where your job takes you and what you want to do after. Do you want to work after, or do you want to, come retirement day, is that it? You want to, hit the golf course or
relax,
something else?
yeah.
That's right. But so get a clear understanding of what your career looks like, or what working looks like for your future. Recreation is an important one, but maybe pretty simple. What do you do for fun, and what costs money? Do you like to do long trips or travel? Do you have expensive memberships? What do you do for fun?
Yeah.
Because what are we working for if we're not retiring and having some fun? So make sure you budget enough and plan enough, so long term you're able to do the things that you want to do when you finally have that time off and to do that.
And I'm going to sidebar you on that one before you get to the M, because I think as women, a lot of times we don't make time for fun. We don't allow ourselves the opportunity to have fun, or to focus on those kinds of things, because we're carrying all sorts of different titles and roles and responsibilities, and we tend to put everybody else first. And so I just want to jump in there, because I think Matthew's point is really important for everybody, obviously men and women, but in particular as women who tend to put themselves ahead of everybody else. It's important to think about the things that you want to do for enjoyment and pleasure, and what brings you that pure joy, and is it travel or these unique experiences? So think about that when you're starting to really explore some of this. Give yourself that permission to do that.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And in my experience, this process does exactly that. It starts to give people permission to spend their money or to spend their time and be a bit selfish for once. So it's nice to go through that process. And finally, money is the last part of this. And Julie, I think even when you and I talked, the people have people develop a bias towards money and in terms of what it means to save, what it means to risk it or invest it. Not everyone's opinion or view on money is the same. It often, again, in my experience, it often comes down to how you were raised. How money did you have access to money? Was there a shortage of money? Did you go without at times? And that usually develops your behavior or view on money now. But it's great to understand. And I think when we went through this experience, there was a bit of an aha moment for you that kind of connected some dots. And, I think that this process this framework gives a bit more clarity for everyone on their current situation and maybe why they feel the way they do about money.
Yeah, agreed. And I love, that's a perfect segue, Matthew, because I think at the end of the day, that money mindset that we talked about earlier is so very important. And so from a take action perspective, one, I want to encourage you to think about the form framework that Matthew just talked about: family, occupation, recreation, and money, and what that looks like for you. But I also want to encourage you to ponder 3 questions when it comes to your money mindset. And this is an exercise that I went through late last year, because I was really frustrated and really struggling with the story I was telling myself about money. And taking some time to dig deeper, to get a little root cause going on about what is keeping me from financial freedom as I see it and want it in my life. So there were these three questions I really needed to dig into. And one of them was, what's your earliest memory of money and what message did it give you about money? And so think back to when you're growing up and what your parents talked about, or the people who were raising you. Was it something that you had a plethora of? Was it something you had very little access to, where you had to prioritize your choices? And it was a luxury to do certain things, and or a faux pas to spend money on something, that today would be, an average everyday thing. So think about the earliest memories you have about the money and what's the message that it tells you. And then when you think about your money today, I want you to think about the first feeling that comes up. You've heard me share here that, I had this shame and this embarrassment. And it wasn't until I was in a place where I could acknowledge that's how I felt about my lack of knowledge or understanding about money and the importance of my financial affairs, so that I could be able to move forward. And so when you think about your money today, what's the first thing comes up? Is it excitement? Is it anxiety? Is it fear? And just acknowledge that and stop and think about why you think those are the things that are coming up when you associate it with money. And here's another question that I love. And when I work with women in my business, I always say, what if a year from now nothing has changed in your life? And so let me ask you that question. What if 1 year from now, your relationship with money hasn't changed? Or what if a year from now, your relationship with money feels more aligned, and you're moving towards the kind of life you want to live and have access to? What would be a way you could describe what that feels like to have that alignment with money? So I leave you with those three questions. And for those of you who've registered, I'll follow up and we'll share the form framework and these questions again for you to percolate on. But just taking that time to reflect and think about those questions would be so powerful to opening up what's next for you from a financial perspective. Hey, Matthew?
Yeah, I love the questions. I think when we sit down, for anyone who's interested, who wants to sit down and build out a financial plan, reach out. I'm happy to have that conversation, and we'll get into the numbers. We'll get into some of those details. But I love these questions to get everyone in the right mindset. Start thinking about the future and what it means to you, what financial independence means to you, because the numbers will tell us story. But really having that vision, having that understanding of where you want to be will help us really chart the course.
Yeah, no, absolutely. All right, Matthew, can you believe it? We were worried we weren't going to have enough to fill the time, and it's already almost 1:45. And we promised everybody we would try and wrap up so that they could get ready for whatever's next for the afternoon. But before we do that, what's one thing that you would say to women who are listening right now that they should do if all of this is completely foreign to them? Or what one piece of advice do you have for women listening right now after today's session?
Okay, a couple of things. One, you're not alone. There's a lot of people, a lot of people listening in right now that are all in the same situation. So reach out without any shame or embarrassment. Start the conversation. The sooner you can have this conversation, start the planning process. You can identify future red flags or issues. You can address them early on, but just get started. And if you want to start some work on your own before meeting with an advisor or a planner, get the Excel sheet out and just start working on your expenses, your assets, liabilities. Just get some of that information on paper. That process alone will probably bring you some peace of mind or comfort, and at the very least will give you a great start to take to some professional support if you go that direction.
Yeah, and we'll start probably as you start to look at the data in front of you, you'll start to ask questions and you'll be curious about, how you can make shifts or what you could do differently. And those are good things. Like that's great stuff. We should be
Exactly.
questioning what we do. And, I have intentionally now in my own reconciliation of my finances, I look at it every week. And once a quarter, I now intentionally have built in a tab in my budget that's calculating my net worth because I've set some goals for debt repayment and all of that. So I want to see how I'm, ebbing and flowing and what's shifting in there. And so just doing it, just getting started can help open the door for so many different things for where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Matthew. So as we wrap up, I do want to remind everybody. So thank you, first of all, for joining us for the first session of our She Got Plans series. We're really excited to have had you join us here. If you're watching, feel free to put some comments. We'll get back to you. If you're watching in the replay, still reach out. We're here for the next month. We're going to do a series. And as a matter of fact, our next session, next Thursday, October 9th, we're going to focus on investing without intimidation, what every woman deserves to know about growing her money. And I'm really excited about this conversation because it is something that I have felt intimidated by in the past. So Matthew and I are going to unpack my journey and share some tips and pointers with respect to how to even get started in this particular way. But we're here Thursdays from 12:10 to 12:45-ish. And if you've registered to attend, you'll get a recording after the fact and a follow-up with some of our tips and key things that we talked about. If you're just joining us and you haven't registered, it's all good. Go ahead and still register. You can visit my website, countryjewel.ca, look for the pop-up box for the event or under Work With Me, and you can register at any point in time. Bring your friends. And once you're registered, you'll get access to all of the post videos and any of the resources that we reference. So any final words, Matthew, before we wrap up now?
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for spending some time with us today. I look forward to continuing the conversation. There's so much to get into. It's going to be a great month. So Julie, thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for joining me, Matthew. I look forward to our conversation next week. And my friends, in living and loving the life we're meant to live, can't wait to see you next week. Take it easy and have a great rest of your day.